They doused a black woman with Coca-Cola at work. Her wealthy husband walks in and gets everyone fired. It was a typical day at the office. But what happened in that moment would change everything. In the middle of a busy meeting, a black woman, Sarah, was drenched in Coca-Cola by her colleagues. The entire office burst into laughter, thinking it was just another joke. But what they didn't know was that her husband, a billionaire businessman, was about to walk through the door. What happens next will leave you questioning everything about justice, privilege, and what we choose to ignore. Sarah Mitchell had always been a professional at work. She was intelligent, focused, and ambitious. In her mid-30s, Sarah had spent years climbing the corporate ladder at the prestigious marketing firm, Carter & Co. With an impeccable track record and numerous successful campaigns under her belt, she was well respected, even admired by her colleagues. Yet there was always a quiet unease, a constant reminder that she didn't quite fit in, despite all of her accomplishments. It wasn't just her race, though, that had always been a silent force that set her apart. It was the subtle, almost imperceptible slights, the snide comments, the dismissive stares, the assumption that she only got her promotions because of diversity quotas. Sarah had worked hard to ignore it. She was driven, focused on proving herself, and determined to rise above the petty office politics. But the latest event, something so small and cruel, would push her beyond her breaking point. It began when the marketing department had just concluded a vital project pitch. Everyone was celebrating in the office lounge, a small open space with glass walls overlooking the city skyline. Sarah had just finished giving a thank you speech, acknowledging her team's hard work, when out of nowhere, a can of Coca-Cola flew from behind her. The cold, sticky liquid splashed across her entire outfit. It wasn't an accident. It was intentional. The room went silent for a brief moment, and then laughter echoed through the office. Her colleagues, led by Janet, the office queen bee, couldn't contain their amusement. "Oops, Sarah! Looks like someone had too much caffeine," Janet said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, as she and the others erupted into giggles. Sarah stood frozen, her heart racing, her mind spinning. The laughter was like a cold slap to her face. But she wasn't going to cry. She refused to give them the satisfaction. As Sarah wiped the Coca-Cola from her eyes, trying to gather herself, she felt the weight of the moment hit her. Her colleagues' laughter was not just mocking her, but everything she represented. The power dynamics at play were palpable. They saw her as a joke. She was the only black woman in a sea of privileged white faces, and in that instant they reminded her of her place. But Sarah had worked too hard to let this slide. As she looked at Janet, her face still twisted in a smirk, a rush of anger surged through her. The humiliation was unbearable. Her pulse throbbed in her temples. The smile on her face was no longer genuine, and for a second, she considered quitting and walking away from it all. The tears burned behind her eyes, but she blinked them back, determined not to let them win. Just then, the door swung open. "Sarah, sweetheart, you here?" The voice was unmistakable. It was her husband, Richard Mitchell. Richard was the kind of man who had made his fortune from the ground up, but not in the traditional sense. He had built his empire with grit, patience, and vision. He was also one of the wealthiest men in the city, known for his no-nonsense attitude when it came to fairness. Richard was the kind of man who didn't tolerate injustice, whether in the business world or his personal life. When he stepped into the office lounge and saw Sarah standing there, drenched in Coca-Cola, his face changed instantly. His gaze swept the room, and he didn't need to ask what had happened. He saw it in Sarah's face, the humiliation, the hurt. His eyes narrowed, and the laughter in the room suddenly felt like an echo from a distant nightmare. For a moment, no one said a word. Janet's laughter died in her throat. Her smug expression faltered as Richard walked towards Sarah, his presence commanding attention, even from the back of the room. Sarah tried to smile, but it was strained, her discomfort all too visible. "It's okay, Richard. Let's just go home," she murmured. But Richard wasn't having it. He turned to the room, his voice cold but steady. "I think we have a serious issue here." Everyone fell silent. They all knew who Richard Mitchell was. A titan in business, a man whose wealth and power were unrivaled. But it wasn't his fortune that mattered at that moment. It was his commitment to fairness and his devotion to his wife. Richard stood at the center of the room, and his following words sent a chill through the air. "You think this is funny? You think treating a woman like this is a joke?" he asked, his voice calm but laced with steel. Janet stepped forward, trying to salvage some form of control. "It was just a prank, Richard. No harm done." But even as she spoke, she knew she had lost the crowd. There was a palpable shift. The laughter had stopped, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. No one wanted to be caught in the crossfire. Richard shook his head. "This isn't a prank. This is a pattern of disrespect, and it's something I won't tolerate." His words hit harder than any physical blow. He wasn't just angry about the soda. He was furious about the systematic disrespect Sarah had endured. He was angry that his wife had been made to feel small in a place where she had worked so hard to excel. "I've seen enough," Richard continued. "You all need to understand that when one of us is hurt, we all are. And today, Sarah's dignity was attacked. So here's what's going to happen." His voice was unwavering. "Janet, you and the rest of your team are fired." Effective immediately, the room was frozen in shock. Janet's face turned white, and the others, who had been part of the incident, stood still, unable to comprehend what was happening. The office, once filled with laughter and casual camaraderie, now felt like a courtroom, silent and tense. Richard turned to Sarah. "We're leaving, sweetheart. And this is the last time you'll be disrespected here." As Richard and Sarah walked out of the office, the murmurs of disbelief followed them. They didn't look back. The elevator ride down to the lobby was quiet, save for the soft hum of the elevator machinery. Richard's eyes softened as he looked at Sarah. "I'm sorry, babe. I didn't want to make this about me, but you didn't deserve that." Sarah smiled faintly, her eyes still raw. "I know, but it's not just about me. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. And for the first time, I feel like someone actually sees me." As they exited the building, Sarah felt a sense of release. The sting of humiliation was still there, but it was tempered by something else: empowerment. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible, and that was something worth fighting for. The impact of what had just transpired would resonate long after. Janet and her team were fired, yes, but the real takeaway was the message Richard had sent. When power is used to silence injustice, it speaks louder than any corporate policy ever could. And as Sarah looked out into the horizon, she couldn't help but wonder, how many times had this happened in silence? How many others had been overlooked, humiliated, or dismissed because of who they were? She had been the one to stand up today, but what about tomorrow? What about the next person? Racial injustice isn't something that can be fixed with a single action, but maybe, just maybe, it's a start. Sometimes it takes standing up for yourself and having someone else stand with you to break the cycle of oppression. We can all be part of the change if we choose to act.